All right, well, with that, guys, let's get started. First off, let me introduce myself. My name is Kurt Pontello. I'm channel manager here at Tech Mode. We also have on the line with us Matt Look, who is the president here at Tech Mode. Today's webinar, we're going to go through the hybrid cloud and how it can affect your business and how it can benefit your business more specifically. We know the time is valuable for all the folks here, so we're going to keep this fairly quick, direct to the point, give you some real life use case scenarios, and kind of run through it from there. So I guess the question I always get asked is, what is the cloud, right? And most of us on this call know what the cloud is, but in the layman's terms, it is just the ability to access data from another place, right? So not within your four walls, not from your computer. It is going out to a data center, maybe that's AWS, maybe that's Google, something like that, and they store your data and you are able to access it anywhere that you have the internet. More specifically, what we're going to talk about today is cloud edge computing, right? So what does hybrid mean, or what does cloud edge computing mean? It really just means a combination of cloud storage and local storage. Most businesses are doing this today, so maybe you have a CRM that is running Salesforce, for instance, and you're going there to get your information, but you have some proprietary information or a software or some kind of appliance that you want to have housed in your building. And, so that's a perfect example of how people are using some things in the cloud, some things on premise that they want to keep local to themselves. When we talk about advantages of the cloud, there's a lot of them, right? And I get asked this question pretty much daily, right? Kurt, what are the benefits of going to the cloud? Why should we do it? What is all this buzz about, right? And, so one of the biggest things that drives people adoption to the cloud is really the ability not to have to drop a large amount of money on a capital investment, right? So I want a new system. It's going to cost me, $100,000. We don't have that in our budget at this time, but the shift with cloud computing and in doing things in the cloud is now they've made that ability accessible for really anybody and on a monthly expense, right? So changing the way that the business consumes things from a CapEx to an OpEx is a big piece of that. And the flexibility for your remote workers, right? We've always had the challenges of how do we support remote people, right? And, as long as they can have access to it, we can get them the tools and things that they need simply by connecting to the internet. And then the last one, and probably one of the biggest ones, right, is the ability to maintain your data, right? So let's say, for instance, I don't know, we come in one day and the building's burnt down. Well, there goes all of our servers, there goes all of our vital information that we had, and this is just, it's gone, right? We didn't have the backups that we needed to. So, people are putting that information, putting that in the cloud, it's backed up in geo-redundant data centers, a lot more flexibility with that. To take advantage of those things and not to lose that mission critical important data. So I kind of broke this down into four main categories of the advantages of the cloud. And the first one is really the accessibility, right? Remember the days of, loading VPNs and do I have the right credentials to get in to access my information? Now with these cloud apps, it's really just launching an application and going right to it and grabbing it, right? I get it from my smartphone, I can get it from my tablet, I can get it from my computer. Anything that has the internet, I'm able to access those things and do it. We did talk about the cost efficiencies of it, but the big thing is especially from an IT perspective, there's, the hardware that's on site. We don't need those big servers anymore. We don't need to pay to upgrade those. Those are all part of, a UCaaS or a cloud offering to, those things are always on the latest and greatest, always up to date. And, it reduces the maintenance team on your staff to have to be able to support those things and to do those upgrades and those mission critical things. And probably one of my favorite ones is the collaboration piece. Like today, right? I'm not physically in your office, not presenting, talking about this. We were able to do these applications by, sharing files, doing video, real-time applications on your mobile devices as far as making calls, just like you're in the office. All of those kind of things, and collaboration has really been the big driver of people moving to the cloud. And the last piece I wanted to say here is the final consideration, and a lot of people don't think about this, but one of the massive benefits, to this is a lot of times it gets overlooked, is the ability to free up the IT staff to focus on, not just the maintenance, the break fix, those kind of things, but really being able to plan for the future for the business, right? And that is invaluable, right? So many times do we get a phone call, hey, Kurt, this is broke. I need you to fix it. I need you to fix it today, kind of thing. But think about if you had the ability to forward think about, you could be proactive instead of reactive to your IT needs. And I think that's what the cloud really frees up those IT managers, those people, to be able to think ahead and not look behind. Is there any questions at the moment?
None here.
None here. All right, great. Yeah, if you got them, feel free to type them in, or feel free to stop me and I can go through it. So, but there are obviously disadvantages to the cloud, right? So the cloud is not, the most beautiful thing. There's definitely some good stuff about it, but there are some drawbacks to it. So the big one is you got to have internet connectivity to get to these applications, right? And most of the time, that's easy to be done, right? We always have internet for the most part and able to access those things. But if we lose the internet, or there's fiber cut in our building, if there's a power outage, or the MPLS goes down, those kind of things, they kind of put a riff in how we communicate to that. In another segment that we are going to be doing, talking about SD-WAN, we will talk about how businesses are planning for those disasters and bringing multiple internet connections, putting redundant things into it, and getting into that in more detail. The other thing is kind of the loss of control. This is some things that people struggle with, right? You're trusting a party to take care of your data. And, do you feel comfortable doing that? Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no. But you have to understand that you're, having a company take care of your solution for you. And then technical issues, sometimes those technical issues that you run into are not fixed by yourself. You used to being able to go in, make that change, and now you're not able to do those things. You're putting yourself in queue, going to those with it as well. So just kind of, differences, pros and cons between going to the cloud and not going to the cloud. So now what we're going to talk about is the hybrid cloud and kind of how that solution really is the best of both worlds, right? We can put applications that make sense in the cloud. We can put things on premise. We can do private clouds, public clouds, and really allow that software to operate across all of those platforms in one unison solution for an organization. And it really gives you a lot of flexibility of where you want to put risk, where you don't, and move things around. And so Matt is going to give us some real life scenarios, kind of walk through what the solutions look like and kind of from an architecture, how that is actually built out. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Matt and let him run through this for us.
Thanks, Kurt. Everybody hear me okay? So
absolutely.
I'm going to basically, good. I'm just going to basically paint with some broad strokes on here. Obviously, there's some exceptions to every scenario we're talking about, but I'm going to make it pretty general and talk in, I won't say in layman's terms, but in generalities about how most systems are set up. So the very first video we're looking at is your traditional premise-based PBX. We've all seen it. We all have had it in the past or have it now. So the setup on it is pretty simplistic. You basically have your Tech Mode Go gateway, which is going to be your on-site PBX. To that, you're going to have your IP phones, SIP phones, digital phones, analog phones, all connected up to it. You'll see at the bottom, you have your incoming trunking, whether it's going to be PRI or SIP or analog. That's coming in however it would come in, whether it's coming in directly from the carrier, whether you're doing over-the-top connectivity to a SIP provider. And then your cell phone app users and remote workers are connecting via the internet, whether that's going to be VPN, dedicated links between the customer site and a remote site, basically how it's worked. Again, this is the setup that's been in place for years and years and years and years, and a lot of people still have today. I'm not even going to ask if there's any questions on that because it's pretty much what we all know. So let's flip to the next one. Let's talk a little bit about a standard hosted deployment. So this is full hosted, and this is going to be the same for just about any cloud provider, whether it's going to be Tech Mode or Bring Central or 8x8 or whoever it's going to be. You'll see at the customer site we no longer have equipment. At that location, most of the time you just have either SIP or IP phones. They connect to the cloud, which is the blue area, via an internet connection. That could be, again, MPLS, it could be over-the-top internet connection, it doesn't really matter, but those phones are controlled, call control and everything comes through the internet and connects to the customer site. You'll also notice that your incoming SIP trunks or your incoming trunking no longer connects to the customer site anymore either. That also moves up to the cloud. And in some instances, you're not going to have any choice but to take the cloud provider SIP trunking. In most multi-tenant scenarios where, again, Ring Central 8x8, where you just have one large phone system that is partitioned off for your specific user, Mitel also, you have to use their SIP trunking provider. They're not going to give access to you to go in and allow third-party endpoints or third-party SIP into their system because they don't want to put that type of security risk across their entire global system. So you see that also coming in through that cloud area. And then basically everything connects to that cloud instance via the internet. So whether that, you'll see the customer site, the cell phone app user, and the remote worker all basically follow that same path. So as far as the cloud instance goes, it knows no difference. It doesn't care whether you're sitting at site A or at site B or at home or on a cell phone or a remote worker. Basically, your call path follows the same path regardless of where you actually sit. Whether it could be in the US, it could be globally, it could be wherever you would want it to be. Just seeing if I missed anything on that one, but I don't think I did. Any questions on that? Kurt, anything I missed on that?
No, it looks good.
Perfect. So let's flip slides. So let's talk about in a hosted deployment, what potentially could happen. So let's say we have a loss. There's a few different losses that could happen. If you lost the customer site, so let's say you do lose that, and this is one of the advantages Kurt had talked about in the cloud scenario. Again, if you lose customer site A or the customer site, the phone system doesn't know any difference. So whether those users are going to be, those calls are going to be answered by cell phone users, remote workers, or you pick up and you move your entire site. Let's say a building due to fire you could no longer occupy it. You could just pick up those phones, move them to a no location. As long as they had internet access, they would function just like they were sitting at your original site. That is probably the biggest flexibility in a hosted deployment, is just the ability to move people at a whim as to where you need them. Trying to think if there's anything else on that I wanted to talk about. I think that's pretty much it. Kurt, anything else? So let's flip back. I just want to talk about the differences between these two, the solution, and let's flip back one slide if you don't mind. Sorry, did I make it hard? So you'll see here we have the incoming, in the SIP trunkings coming into the TechMode Go cloud solution. Customer site has no gateway. So let's flip to the next slide because I want to just point out these differences. So let's talk about our edge or our hybrid solution. So you'll notice a couple changes. One is you'll see there's now a gateway at the customer site. The benefit of our solution or the Avaya solution is that those gateways are actually working fully integrated gateways. So if you're on the IP office world, it's going to be an IP 500 gateway, which is fully integrated into the cloud solution. If it's a communication manager or a platform, it'll be a G430 or a G450, or it could even be a G650, whatever you would want it to be. That gateway gives you a few advantages. One is you look below on the customer site, as opposed to just being SIP endpoints, we now have the ability to do digital and analog. And yes, you can do them in just a pure cloud environment without the hybrid or the edge solution, but it's almost like a one-off. In this scenario, we can plug those gateways. You could do a 24-port analog card. We could do digital phones. If you had a high density digital environment where maybe there's just a lot of warehouse or something like that. Those all plug into the gateway and operate just like your PBX was on site, but it's almost like I want to say a dummy gateway, because it is smarter than a dumb gateway. But it can be, think of it almost like that, with the ability to give you redundancy if you were to lose the cloud. Another option that we do see here on this drawing is we also have not only the SIP trunking coming into the cloud instance, but we also have SIP trunking or PRI trunking coming into the local gateway. So we've gained a few levels of redundancy in this hybrid solution. One is we've added a gateway to the remote site so that if we do lose that internet connectivity, we can still survive. We've also added a second incoming route for trunks to reach phones. So if you follow the Visio, whether this incoming SIP trunking is coming in through the cloud, you can follow, and you can see it can reach the customer site just as easily as it can really reach the remote workers and the cell phone users, but also follow it the other way. We can also come in through the site through a PRI and still reach all those destinations, including the cloud. So everything flows between the two. You could have this as a active-active, where maybe you have the SIP trunking coming into the cloud, but then also you have a PRI being that's actively taking calls coming into the gateway. You could do it as a slave, a master and a slave, where it primarily always goes to the cloud. But if the cloud destination isn't reachable, it then comes in through the gateway. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to cover for outages. And that's really what the advantages of hybrid are. So again, you're going to cover a lot of the options or potential failures that you might have. It gives you some redundancy. And it also gives you the ability to support multiple different endpoints. Any questions on that slide? Kurt, anything
No, that was a very good explanation, Matt.
Great. Let's go to the next slide. And this is going to be a little bit of a rehash about what we just talked about. So in this situation where we've lost the cloud solution, and again, I'm painting in pretty broad strokes here, but whether it's going to be a single instance or multi-instance cloud solution, if you lose that cloud solution, what happens? And the fact of the matter is at some point in the future, we are going to see a major cloud outage. And I don't know how familiar everybody is, but there was a pretty large denial of service attack yesterday against Amazon and against Google. It didn't have any large reaching impacts to the environment, but at some point in the future, we are going to see that happen. So what happens when you're in a hybrid solution and you actually lose the cloud? So we can follow, if we're tracking an incoming call, we'll see whether we're going to have a different call route that's going to come in through that PRI SIP at the very bottom. Calls can still reach the gateway. The gateway will take control of the digital, analog, and SIP phones. So anything that you had or any programming you had for call routes or anything of that nature will still exist. All your SIP phones, digital phones, and analog phones will operate. You'll be able to answer calls because those will come in still to the customer site. And as you can see here, your cell phone apps and your remote workers can still reach the customer site so they can still work and still be operational. When that cloud instance comes back up, everything can automatically sync back up if that's what you choose to do, or we can do it as a manual failback to make sure the instance is stable and operational. Not too long ago, a major competitor of ours just had a major outage of their cloud solution for, I want to say 24 hours, wasn't it, Kurt? Where they weren't able to make, receive, or get calls. So a lot of businesses were heavily impacted by this major outage. And in this hybrid world, those people would not have experienced an outage. Basically, the calls just would have had to come in through a different trunk group, and they could have still operated and been able to take calls. So.
And one thing I did want to add, yeah, it was over 24 hours, but the incoming calls for the SIP and the SIP trunking, we can take those numbers that are pointed to the cloud solution and actually take those and reroute those numbers to your incoming local trunks that you have. So taking those numbers, doing an RCF to those. So if you have specific numbers that you wanted to maintain or your main telephone numbers, move all of those over, and that happens very quickly in that scenario.
Okay, no questions? Let's go to the next slide. And we've sort of already talked about this, but what happens in this hybrid solution if you lose your customer site? And that basically at that point, it just becomes a cloud solution, right? So the customer site, whether it's fire or tornado or whatever it might be, that site would go down, but as you can still see, you still have a cloud solution. So your incoming trunks that route to the customer site can just either be rerouted or automatically fail over to the incoming SIP route into the cloud. From there, connect to the internet, your cell phone users and your remote workers will still work. You could take your IP phones or SIP phones, move them somewhere else, have them operational, or you physically could pick up your gateway, all your IP phones, all your digital phones, all your analog phones, move them to a temporary site and be up and operational within the amount of time it takes you to actually physically move that hardware. So there's a lot of options that can happen. So you kind of get the best of both worlds in the hybrid, where if a cloud outage happens, you have the ability to fail over to your local gateway. If the local gateway fails or you lose the site, you still have the ability for the cloud solution to operate. And then kind of going back to what Kurt had spoke about earlier, when we talked about giving up control, right? And we're probably the outage we saw not too long ago was probably the biggest cloud outage we've seen of a competitor of ours in years. They're just out of luck, right? You've given up control. They're calling tech support. They're waiting on hold for hours. They're waiting for updates. They don't know what's happening just because the competitor was just overwhelmed with calls and people trying to solve the issue. So basically, you're just to sit and wait, and you really don't know what's going to happen. Again, when you do the hybrid solution or the edge solution, yeah, the cloud's down, and that's unfortunate, but your business can still operate because we can just fail, it automatically will fail you back over to that gateway. See if I missed anything on that. I don't think I did. So I'm going to use an example of another example of why hybrid will work in a lot of instances. This is a large multi-site automotive dealer. They actually have more sites than what we're looking at here, but we just try to simplify the drawings to keep them easy. The quick scenario on it is the customer was stuck in existing PRI contracts for their locations for another 3 years, but they really wanted to upgrade and get to the cloud. A few advantages of going to the cloud are they were just tired of having to upgrade every few years. They're tired of always having to get the latest releases of software. They wanted to be able to do collaboration. They wanted to be easier access for cell phone users and remote workers. So for all those reasons, the cloud made a lot more sense for them. Problem was they had existing PRI contracts. So what do? How do we get them out of the contracts? In a large multi-tenant solution where you're looking at a cloud solution, you're just going to be stuck with those contracts, or you're going to have to wait for them to expire and then 3 years from now potentially move to the cloud. Reason being is because they're not going to let you bring your own trunking into their multi-tenant solution. So what we were able to do in our solution is we were able to take their PRIs that are coming in today, connect those to the gateways that are on site. Those gateways register back up to the cloud, and we were able to give them a cloud solution and keep them in their existing PRI contracts. Now, in our solution, we don't care whether you bring your own trunking, you use our trunking, you use a combination of both. It really doesn't matter. So in this situation, most of the time, what you see the cloud doing is just call control. So if we have an incoming call coming in that's going to a digital phone on site B, so the call's coming in through the PRI and it's connecting to a digital phone on site B. The cloud is actually doing the call control, but that call or that audio never leaves the site. So the PRI card connects it directly through to the digital phone, and that audio is not traversing the internet going all the way up to AWS, is what we use. Coming back down, you don't end up with that latency or the potential failure, loss of packets or anything like that that may potentially happen. But we were able to move them into a good solution, not have to really worry about internet latency at this point because the phones are just hairpinning from the PRI card to the actual endpoint they're connecting to, and the call's connected. If for some reason we were to lose that gateway, we could reroute calls to from their existing PRI provider into our cloud. We would just need to call forward those to other numbers that are ours, bring them into the cloud and connect them up. But there is some flexibility that the customer has in this scenario. Again, it got them out of contracts, it got them the ability to move to the cloud without having to either buy out 3-year contracts that they had with their existing carrier or wait 3 years and get what they want at that point. And I think that was it on that drawing. Any questions? Any of those drawings we need to go back and talk about, or how it all works? Again, I did paint it with a pretty broad brush, but you know, there's a lot of differences in this when you talk multi-tenant versus single instance tenant in the cloud. But we can save those for another webinar. Good?
Great, thank you, Matt. No, that was very good. Answered the questions and yeah, no, it was great. All right, so moving on, just kind of to rehash a little bit about what Matt was talking about, but you know, just some things that we were able to do with that multi-site auto dealership, right? The ability to get them out, you keep those existing contracts and reuse it. And we have done this, I guess, time and time again for our customers to be able to do that. They want to make the transition from the cloud because it just made sense for them financially, and allowing them to do that before the contracts allowed them to. And then the nice thing is when those contracts expire, they can move the services over to us. They can stay with their existing carrier. We're flexible when it comes to that point and what they want to do with it. So why does hybrid matter to you, right? And at the end of the day, the biggest thing I would leave you with is the redundancy that it offers to an organization, right? The stress that it takes out of your life of, okay, the cloud goes down, what do we do, right? The on-premise system goes down, what do we do? It covers the rainy day scenario in both realms, and it really gives you the flexibility to it. And like Matt alluded to earlier, let's face it, there's going to be a major cloud outage, right? We haven't seen too many major ones, but it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. But the flexibility that the cloud allows an organization and how nimble they can be with those applications living up there really has a lot of business sense, and it really has a lot of financial sense for customers as well. So I guess the last thing I want to leave everybody with here is some of the advantages of a Tech-Mode Go hybrid solution. And with us, we allow you guys to do it full cloud, full premise, a combination of both, and we can move as you want to within this. So as Matt alluded to earlier, the software that we're going to be running from a premise perspective is going to be the same exact software that you're going to have in a cloud perspective. So you know, the ads, moves, changes, all the work that you're used to doing, your incoming call routes, how those things are, it's just going to migrate over to the next one. So it's the same interface, same look and feel that you are used to having, but all at your fingertips, right? And in all, you know, either in a hybrid or a full cloud mode, we can do something like that. And this is really a unique differentiator between us and a lot of the competition. People will talk about hybrid and things that they can do with it, but the true scale of the Avaya backbone piece of it, and coming from the premise world and moving to the cloud is a lot different than companies that have just been created out of the cloud, right? So there's a lot of differentiations between those solutions.
One thing I just want to add to that, Kurt, if you don't mind, is again, we can do a full cloud, we can do a hybrid cloud. There's a lot of different options, but as your business needs change, so let's say, you know, at some point we move you to the cloud, and cloud's great, and that's exactly where you need to be. As your business changes or evolves, or as the needs change within the organization where like, okay, cloud's no longer going to work for us, we need to bring that phone system back in-house. We can take your existing translations, your existing software, and move it right back into your virtual environment overnight, and you can be up and operational the same day on the same software, out of the cloud and back on-prem with minimal to zero interruption. Huge flexibility within your business. Again, cloud might make sense for you today. Who knows, 5-10 years down the road, if you still want to keep it in the cloud. If you do, great. If you don't, we pull the software down, we load it in your virtual environment, and you're up and running just like you were the day before in the cloud.
No, great point, Matt. And yeah, never being locked into one solution, right? The flexibility to move back and forth between the two is really something great. So with that being said, do we have any questions, anything that anybody else wanted to discuss? Anything like that?
Not on our end.
Okay. All right.
Good presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that hardware you guys have listed, is that actually Avaya equipment, or is that actually something unique that Tech-Mode's doing? Like the gateways you have listed there.
Sure. The gateways are specifically Avaya gateways, but the solution that we're doing with it, with the trunking and the redundancy, is unique to us.
Okay. Gotcha.
And again, they don't necessarily have to, and just to be a little clear on that, it doesn't have to be Avaya. We could do audio codes gateways. We have in the past, things of that nature. The benefit of doing the integrated Avaya gateways is it gives us the ability to do the resiliency on-prem, right? If we're doing like an audio codes analog to SIP converting box, that's great and it'll work. The problem is you just don't, we can't fail over to it if we lose the cloud instance. When we do the actual Avaya gateways, we can do the failover back to prem if we do lose the cloud.
Gotcha.
Did I answer your question or did I give you too much information?
No, that's perfect.
Perfect, great.
All right, well, wonderful. If there's no further questions, guys, attached is our contact information up on the screen there for you. If you want to see any more of this in live and working manner, we are able to do this. We actually have a great demo unit that shows all of this, and we've actually created that to take on the road. So if you ever wanted to see it, have us bring it down, show you, we're able to do those for you as well. But with that, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the time today. Hope you all have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk to you very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Kurt.
You're welcome.